welcome to the fourth webinar of the digitalization webinar series. My name is Sara Morrocchi. I'm the CEO and founder of Vuna Origin Consulting. And today I am so pleased that I'm going to be your host for this webinar. So together with Elisa at Expressing Origin, we were so eager to find solution to digitalize coffee. And when we started talking, we saw the need to create a space and really start a conversation around digitalization in the industry. For too many times, we felt that digitalization took a backseat in our industry, and we wanted to bring this to the forefront. And really, this was the best time, especially during the pandemic and COVID, to really start focusing on this. Over in the webinar series, we touched on different topics. First, we focused on what is the meaning of digitalization. Then we looked at what digitalization looks like, depending on where you are in the value chain: producer, exporter, trader, roaster. And last week, we looked at strategies to secure a successful digitalization implementation, specifically focused on Origin. And today, we really want to focus on what it takes to build digital tools and become more familiar with processes in software development and understanding the do's and the don'ts, the challenges and the successes when you start building digital tools. And so in order to have this discussion, we put together a panel of amazing speakers who I'm now about to introduce. So today, I'm very excited to have with us Jean Orlowski, which is the CEO and CEO and co-founder of ECropOrigin. We have Dominik Mucklow, product manager at Cropster. Hi, Dominik. And last but not least, we have Oscar Magro, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Sustainable Harvest. Hi, Oscar. Okay, before we dive into the conversation for today, let us do a little bit of housekeeping to make sure we run the session smoothly. First of all, the webinar will be recorded and it will be available for viewing in the digitalcoffeefuture.com website. After the panel discussion, we will also have a Q&A session. If you want to ask a question to the panelists, make sure you do it in the Q&A tab. That's where you can ask the question. If you have a question specifically for a panelist, make sure that you say, hey, I want to ask Dominik, or I want to ask Oscar, I want to ask Jean. To get the best sort of experience, I would recommend you choose the gallery mode, so you can see all of us on the same screen. And last but not least, take a minute, introduce yourself in the chat, let us know who you are, your name, who you represent, who you work with, and where you find yourself in the world. We would love to know who you are. And then last but not least, let us thank our media partners, Barista Magazine and the Coffee Podcast, who have been supporting us since the beginning. And then, of course, our sponsors who are here today, ECropOrigin, Cropster, and Sustainable Harvest. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that now I can just have my full attention on my speaker. As I said, in this webinar, we really want to talk about what it takes to build digital tools. We want to become familiar with software development processes and learn about the do's and the don'ts, challenges, failures, and successes of building digital tools. So let's start with our first round of questions for our panelists. Dominik, Cropster recently launched a new product called Cropster Origin. Walk us a little bit through what the product is and tell us more about it.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks. So you're right. We recently re-released Cropster Origin. Actually, it's our oldest product. It was originally built 13 years ago by the founders of Cropster in Colombia, and they were aiming to deliver a solution back then for farmers to manage their agronomy and all the different budgeting that went into running a coffee farm. They then didn't encounter a lot of commercial success with it and then pivoted to working with roasters. And the roast product has been a great success over the years. So then about 2 years ago, they started looking again at Origin, and we have spent this time refurbishing it and adding a whole bunch of new tools and bringing it sort of into the modern era.
Thank you so much, Dominik. Jean, same question to you. ECrop, you recently joined the coffee sector. You have a background, you have a different background, but you joined the coffee tribe. Tell us more about ECropOrigin. What does it do?
Yeah, right. Well, thanks for having me actually today at the panel. So yeah, we are maybe the newest application actually in the coffee sector for digitization. My background, as you mentioned, is a little bit different also maybe than some others, because I'm coming from the finance industry. I spent about 20 years all around the world actually in the trading area for futures on the futures markets. And since 8 years, I also own a coffee farm. I own and manage a coffee farm here in Hawaii, and also work for other farmers actually managing their farms. The whole concept of ECropOrigin started because we are certified organic. And when you're certified organic, you have a lot of audits and a lot of data to manage to be able to do that efficiently, especially when you have a large farm, a large organization. So we've started with this about 2 years ago. And since then, we've started to add a lot of features to it. So the whole concept of the application has, I would say, two sides. One is the whole traceability of the supply chain. We are covering the whole supply chain from the field to the cup of coffee and everything's in between. So from farmers to processors, buyers, brokers, roasters, and even the end client at the end if we need to. So that's one concept, is really the traceability and transparency. The other one is very important actually for me. When you manage at every stage of the coffee supply chain, when we own coffee, we are basically business owners also somewhere. And when we are working on the business side, well, we're here to basically make some profit. If not, that's we hear a lot actually today in the coffee industry that a lot of people actually are struggling. So basically, making money is very important. And so we've built a tool that's very easy to use. You don't need to be an accountant actually to look at numbers if you present them easily. So we've built a tool for every players in the supply chain, from the farmers, the processors, and so on. And we give them tools to be able to see where they can improve. And how do we improve in terms of profitability, basically, other than the trace and transparency? Well, you can improve your expenses, of course. Your quality is very important, and your volume. And when you start to put that together, over time, when you have data, you can base your decision on facts. And so we've built the whole tool based on that. And again, so we have a module for the farmers that helps them to know what's going on the farm, and that's helpful to see if there are parts of the farm that are doing better than others and so on. All the picking, all the processing, recording all the data also. So we are linked to other two machines, like dryers, scales, and so on. So we try to automate as much as possible within the application. We also have a small AI engine actually that's helping not only actually with the accounting part, but also with the transparency and trace. So like more or less to I would say, certify a little bit the coffee with data. So we are able to, with very basic numbers, for example, if you have 1 acre of coffee and you're producing only 1,000 pounds, well, that's a prime. We can basically give you information for you to improve based on those data. So again, decision making based on facts.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you for that overview. Oscar, sustainable harvest has been in coffee industry for 2 decades, and it's you've been with sustainable harvest for many years. We know that sustainable harvest invested a lot in digitalization of its own processes. Tell us a little bit what you've built over the years and what's been the evolution.
Yes, Sarah. Well, I've been working in coffee for a little bit over 20 years. And the first years I work processing coffee and exporting coffee from Mexico. And then in 2002, I joined Sustainable Harvest. But also my background is in IT. So as I am a software developer by training. So I always wanted to build systems for keeping the traceability of the coffees that we traded back when we were exporting and milling coffee. And when I joined Sustainable Harvest, we had the need of creating a system where we could keep track of all the contracts that we were getting. And obviously that was when we established the first Origin offices in 2002 in Mexico, and the headquarters were in Portland, Oregon. So we always try to focus on that, try to be able to have a tool with where we could work together from remote places, and also out of that, as an offspring of this system, which is called RITS, for Relationship Coffee Information Tracking System. Out of RITS, this is where we have the core business of all the data that is core business for us. And out of that, also, we have created other projects. Like we at some point, we created a RITS for farmers also back in the day that we tested in several countries. And we had a lot of challenges, adoption among them. But also other projects that were successful, like Tastify, which I'm also a Q grader, or I was certified at some point. And so I'm also a copper. A big percentage of my time back when I started with Sustainable Harvest, I wear a lot of hats, and one of them was quality control. And so I also helped develop Tastify, because I wanted to an easy way to keep track of all the copies that we had. So yeah, that's a little bit of the history of the systems and that we have developed. And most recently, also we're releasing, as we speak, a customer portal where customers would have access to their position reports, being able to approve samples, being able to see what they have on inventory, release coffees, and things like that.
That's great, Oscar. As I suspected, a lot of tools that have been built for the company over the years. So a great example of internal digitalization, right, for a company. So we now, I think we have a better idea of what these, the tools that you guys built do, what they are. But as I mentioned, we get a lot of interest from the audience. There's like, well, how do you actually build it, right? How can you get to an idea, to actually a tool that is functional, and what are some of the software development processes that need to happen in order to turn an idea into a tool that is functioning and is operational. So Dominik, let me get back to you. Can you explain us, like, a tool like Cropster Origin is built? What type of software development does it need? Anything you feel like sharing with the audience today?
Sure. We generally try to follow what's called an agile workflow when we're developing things, which means start small and fail fast. We will take any feature that we're trying to add, say it's like the processing tool, and we want to distill it down to its bare basics. Then we want to test that as widely as possible. So processing, we're monitoring, the conversion factor between cherry and parchment. Now that might work in Ethiopia just fine. In Colombia, they're mostly receiving parchment coffee at these dry mills and aren't interested in that particular aspect, but they're interested in a different yield factor and they express it in a different way. And then in Indonesia, we have a completely different wet hulling process, and that all needs to be taken into account and considered. So it's a compromise between the flexibility that we want to give to our users, but then the idea not to build every single possible permutation. There's a temptation in all development to think of everything that the user might want to do and cram it all into the very first version. And we have to guard against that because we will undoubtedly make mistakes in that process and invest a lot of resources into it and not necessarily achieve the outcome we want. So we would always start small. We would build the feature, test it extensively, both before and after it's actually deployed to the general user base, and yeah, it relies on user feedback. The more successful you are depends on responding to your customers and responding to the people that are actually using it. So we don't want to just imagine what they want. We want them to tell us, and then we'll start that agile workflow all over again.
Thank you, Dominik. So refreshing to hear that failing happens, and you might as well want to do it fast. We've been hearing throughout the series that a lot of people tried to build tools, and a lot of people failed. And I think that there's a lot of frustration that comes with it. Of course, nobody wants to fail, but it sounds like what you described is a process that understands that failure is possible, but you do it in a way that is manageable. And as you said, start small, fail fast, keep building and testing. That's great takeaway. Oscar, again, you've been building tools for the company for the last 2 decades. How did you start with RITs and then open its functionalities that were mainly for internal purposes, for staff, and how did you then expand it to the outside to customers? Can you talk to us a little bit of how you start your own system and then open it up to others in the process, and any challenges or that you have encountered while doing that?
Yeah, well, as Dominik as well, we started with a small scope. Obviously, back then we were only 4 of us, so it was easy to please everybody, and we wanted to keep it small to the core of the contracts and quality control, which was always important. But as we grew as a company, we had to address different things. So we had to address financing, we had to address delivery orders, we had to do more quality control, because when we started also, it was we would take notes in a paper with and then we would put those averages, let's say, on the system. But when the iPads, for example, came up, that was a great opportunity for us to develop something where we could record all the copies from all the coppers. So that took us to the first version of Tastify that was only embedded in RITs. And then we decided, well, let's take that out, and based on customer feedback and suppliers that were seeing what we were using, they said, well, why don't you make it available for everybody? And so that's why we decided to invest in creating a standalone application, web application that will address the copying in a different approach. We wanted to also make it so it's not just about the score, but also the descriptors and pictures a little bit more of the profile in terms of the attributes of the coffee. But also when we started, we didn't have a lot of things that we have now. We have like electronic signatures, we have APIs, integration with a lot of different systems, and among them is Tastify. So we create everything in RITs, and then we just send the copying session, for example, for Tastify, the coppers go cup the coffee, and the information comes back to RITs. So we try to keep one system where we have all the information, and Jan, for example, was talking about certifications. That's something that we have to address as well. So that's something that we didn't have at the beginning, but then because of recertifications and audits, we knew that we had to have a place where we, a repository, we have all the documents that the auditors request. And so that's now how, when we get audits, it's pretty straightforward and easy because we have everything in one place, and it's easy to populate anything that we get asked to. So, and I think that what is really important is to know your process. If you don't know what your processes are, it's really hard to take those processes into and digitize them. Once you know your process, then you can digitize it. Otherwise, it's just like a moving target, right? And it doesn't allow you to have an agile development, as Dominik was mentioning.
Thank you for raising this part. Know your process before you start building. It sounds so obvious, and yet it's throughout the webinar series and through the feedback that we're getting, it sounds like it's quite a common problem. People want to build something, and then in the middle of it, they're not quite sure how the process actually works. And then, especially when you're relying on software developers to do the tool for you, that's when a lot of friction and frustration comes, because nobody really knows what the process is, and somehow there's an expectation that the software developer will have the answer, but you're supposed to know how your company works, and you're supposed to know how processes like collection and purchasing or certifications. So definitely know your process, and then go for the agile development, as Dominik was saying. Thank you, Oscar. That was great. Jean, from how you explained what ECropOrigin is, it seems like the product is built for farmers, for cooperatives, for traders, and roasters. So it can provide services across the entire chain. I'm curious to know how you approach what seems an ambitious project. How did you come around it? What processes did you use to achieve your vision?
So first, sorry. So we've started about 2 years ago. So it's not something we did within 6 months. As any project, when you start a large project, you need to have a good team. So that's actually it's key. If you don't have the people, that's when it's very difficult to do. And you cannot do it alone because, well, alone, as you say, that's when you cannot know everything. That's when that's not possible. So you need to have the proper contacts. You need to know your process. And it's almost impossible for one person to have the detailed knowledge, because when you build an application, especially at the start, we are not talking about the high level knowledge. You need to have actually the detailed knowledge to be able to design. So that's one aspect. It's really the team and the contacts to know where to get actually the detailed description, the analysis of each functionality. Then you start to design your whole project. You start to choose your technology, because that's also very important. You know, technology behind everything we do. That's mean if we don't have the technology, basically we have nothing. And we also have challenges within the, I would say, the coffee industry. If I try to make a parallel, for example, with the finance that I know quite well, there are a lot of standardization in the finance industry. For example, when you make a payment, you can do it through Swift, you can do through this kind of protocol. We don't have that through the coffee industry. So yes, we can build APIs, for example, those kind of things, but at the end, we all have different tools and they are not talking together. So if we cannot standardize somehow, sometime at one point, it's very difficult actually to have a global view of what's happening within the coffee industry. So it's maybe a little bit easier on the C market because you have an exchange, but when you start to talk about, let's say, smaller organization, maybe it's not the right definition comparing to the C market, it starts to be a little bit different because we are completely scattered to multiple application, multiple location, multiple needs. And so that's a big challenge because you need to have a tool that's as open as possible and well, through an agile development or anything else, that you need to be very quick to react. When somebody needs something, you need to have it as quick as possible also. So again, you need to have a good team, enough developers, the proper technology, and at the end, you are able to do that. And then you need to think about all the challenges you will have behind. So the challenge can be, well, if you start trading on the application or if you start to have transaction on the application, one of the challenges is that how do you guarantee delivery? As of now, I don't know, unless you're a broker, because we all have different problems also. If you're a broker and you hold the coffee, you don't have actually this problem because you hold the coffee, so you can guarantee delivery. But if you're not, you cannot. So that's a big challenge actually that as far as I know, no solution as of now other than trust. And so then the data are becoming very important within this trust. So again, you need the knowledge of the industry, you need the technical knowledge, which, to be honest, the technical knowledge is usually the easiest because you can, if you describe your process properly, you can always develop something behind if you have the means to do it. So it's really the knowledge that you need to have. And so that's how we did it. We have a good team.
Wow, great, great. So it's about having good teams, knowing your processes, and adopt systems like the agile development. That sounds like three of the pillars to building tools. That's great, guys. Thanks for this overview. Why don't we ask the audience a question? So I would love to. Start our first poll, so we get also our participants to give us some feedback. So the question is, digitalizing your value chain, which is the functionality you are most looking for? So please take a vote and tell us what functionalities you're looking for the most. Dominik, if you had to take this question, what would be your answer? You're on mute.
We tend to focus on quality centric things at Cropster first. We of course want to tackle everything on this list, but from an origin standpoint, monitoring production is sort of the framework around which you could build all these other quality related tools. So I'd start with that, but they're all nice to have, and we want to get them all at one point.
Right. In an ideal world, you want to have all, but we know prioritization. Oscar, how about you? What would you take if you had to choose?
Yeah, I think that for me would be to get the information from the last mile, from the moment that from the producer all the way until the coffee gets exported. I think that having the granularity of the information from that would be great for me and for us as a company as well.
Lovely. Jean, you also get a chance to answer and take the poll while we wait for the last few answers to come in.
Yeah, so of course, all of them that they're all important. Some are easier to provide than others. So the traceability is important, and the quality also. Of course, if you have quality, you can have a better price, you'll have a better product. It helps the whole chain, but all of those items are very important.
Right, right. Okay, that's great. Well, we're 2 minutes. Yeah, let's look at the results. Well, it sounds like the winners would be monitor production and access reports on activities performance. So I guess people want to know, are we on track? Are we performing well? And of course, monitor the production, make sure that coffee is coming in. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks everybody for taking the first. Thank you for the first poll. That was good insights. All right, so we talked about the what, and we talked about the how. Like how do you move from an idea, a concept, to a tool that actually does what it's supposed to be doing, or what you think it's supposed to be doing. But now I want to talk a little bit about the why. Why do we build tools, and what is ultimately the value that we want to get out of the tools that we build and we invest time and resources. So, Oscar, I'll start with you on this one. What do you think has been the value for Sustainable Harvest to basically decided to go digital from its super early days, since the very beginning?
I think that we want to accomplish is to build efficiency in our processes, in our systems, and to be able to be prepared for things like this, for example, for the crisis that we're facing right now with COVID-19. I think that that's what has prepared us as a company to move quickly and to be completely working out of our houses. I think that hasn't stopped us. We keep moving coffee. We keep working. Everybody right now from home, even at our origin countries offices. Rates has allowed us to keep moving the coffee, paying coffee, and Tastify, for example, keeping us in terms of quality control over all the offices, keep copying the coffees. Portland, Oregon, as well, keeping all the records. And the thing is that since we have built our systems from scratch, we don't use a third-party option. We are not constrained in terms of also this industry moves pretty fast and is always changing. And what allows us is that we can do modifications to our systems pretty quickly, so we don't have to rely on updates from a third party. In that regard, for example, Dominik was mentioning the differences between, for example, what a yield in different countries means, and obviously in a software that is widely available, you have to take into account a lot of different aspects, because it reflects on the market that you want to get access to. But in our case, our market or our users are a finite number. So as long as we keep everybody happy in the company in terms of the features that they want, the features that need to be automated or if to have more efficient process, we can address them quickly and in a easy manner. So we're always evolving as the industry evolves as well. And that's also why we also decided to go and take it to the next level and make it available also for customers, because customers also want to have access to all of us and want to have updated reports, updated position reports, being able to release coffees in an easy manner, probably without having to call anybody or any office. So that makes it a lot easier for us as well.
That's great. So yeah, by basically digitalizing your processes from the very beginning. You were able to sort of address or change the system as the processes change themselves over the year. As you said, coffee moves really fast, so you're able to do that. And yeah, I think even when we spoke before this webinar, you mentioned you guys were able to sort of stop going to the office and work remotely, with almost, from day one, because the system did it all for you. So that's great. Thank you, Oscar. Jean, I wanna bridge to you now, because I wanna speak about the value that you wanted to deliver when you decided to build ECropOrigin, both for users and beneficiaries, and because you really make this tool available for the entire value chain. Where do you see the benefit of using a platform like yours in our sector?
Yeah, so there are, of course, multiple benefits. That's, when you have data, you can use them almost any way you want. And every one of us will use it differently. So it's difficult also to satisfy everybody. But if you have the data, then you can start to build on it. You can start customizing. So that's the idea of getting data. But you can mainly use data why? For decision making. That's very important. If you have the data through the whole supply chain, so again, like when did you pick your coffee? How much did you pick? How did you process your coffee? What kind of method? All this is impacting the quality. So everything is basically interconnected, between the decision making, the quality. And at the end, of course, I'm still coming back to the P&L, because we're all here to make some kind of profit. If not, it's becoming a problem through the whole supply chain. Even the end clients, the end consumer actually now want to know where his coffee coming from and what happened in between. Whatever are the discussions, in terms of transparency of cost and so on, those are basically, we all have our own opinion on this, but it's very important that the data are built properly. And again, that we give those data in an easy way to consume. And that's what we've tried to do. So we have graphs, for example. As I say, you don't need to be an accountant to look at your number. Basically, you have an income, you have an expense, and at the end, you have a difference. And that's what accounting is. If you look at it this way, it's very simple. You need to look at all your processing. When you have cherries, what's your ratio to parchment? What's your ratio to green? Because, when you have a large production, even 2 or 3% makes a big difference at the end. All this is based on capturing data, and that's what we're trying to give. And of course, through the whole supply chain, you want to have real-time inventory. Very important. You want to know what's in your warehouse, to the pound, because, well, that's, again, it's very important. And that's the pricing is very important for negotiation. If you're a farmer and you're selling coffee, you want to know what's your cost, but maybe you don't want to disclose that before you have, it's negotiation. So all this is based on what we can offer. Transparency, again, on the data through the whole application. And again, they are challenges through all this. But I hope that, I think that our application is covering most of them, and that we are able to give something that's very user-friendly. One of the main challenges we have is to have a very user-friendly application. We go through a difficult, I don't want to say difficult, but the setup actually can be easy or difficult depending on how much data you want to capture. Basically, if you want to capture a lot of data, you need to have a lot of setup. That's one of the main challenges we are encountering when we go through setting up a new client. And we have entry points. So again, you can start using the application at the farming level, or you can start using it when you have parchment, or when you have green, or even roasted. So again, you have entry points at each level, so we can cover the whole chain.
Thank you, Jean. And yeah, I mean, it's good that you brought up data, and we already covered data a lot throughout the series. And one of one of the points that a lot of our panelists raised was also making sure, hey, data collection is important, but data for the sake of data is pointless. Data is there to drive decision making, to provide insights on your performance. It's supposed to lead to action, and whether it's negotiating a price, making sure that your P&L looks healthy, where you need to cut, where you need to invest or de-invest in order to make sure you stay afloat. So thanks for reminding us that data and insights through the data is important, and how it's managed. So Dominik, again, I mean, Cropster is one of the most known tech providers in coffee. Your job is responding to the needs of users. And what do you think has been the most beneficial value that Cropster Origin has delivered to users at Origin?
Following along with that thread from just now, where not just collecting data for data's sake, but actually doing something with it, is also linked to the idea of quality that we touched on earlier. And I like to distinguish between the two things we do with quality. There's quality control, which most people are familiar with in terms of cupping and green grading, and analyzing coffee that's already been processed and is ready for roasting. And then there's quality assurance, which actually comes before, which is what you can do actively while the coffee is being picked and harvested and processed and converted to its final form. All the changes you can affect in that time period to really make sure that you're getting the most out of the harvest. And so that really goes to the core of what Cropster is all about. We focus on quality assurance. In our roast product, it's our roast curve and profiling to make sure that the roast comes out correctly. And in Origin, it has to do with monitoring processing. We want to get people to know if there's going to be a problem, say in the drying phase of processing. If the temperature gets too hot and the beans start to crack, well, that is loss. That is going to affect their bottom line and needs to be avoided. So we have sensors that are placed out on the drying beds, and then if the temperature goes above a certain threshold, the user gets a ping to their email and can go and cover up the coffee and take some action proactively in real time to ensure that that quality potential is realized. And quality, we talk about it, and people automatically associate that with specialty coffee, and it's for sure, very relevant for specialty, but it's just as relevant for the commercial side of the industry. We're talking about loss due to fermentation problems, due to drying problems, and just all the other environmental factors that affect. So Cropster is really interested in capturing all of those errors and limiting them to maximize everybody's bottom line.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear from all of you, all these different aspects of how you can deliver value, and just basically helping companies, whether it's your own company and your own co-workers, or folks at Origin, or folks in consuming countries. I mean, in the end, is helping them making better decisions and increasing performance, and hopefully becoming more competitive, not just financially, but also just in the market in general. So that's great, guys. I think now it's time to ask our audience to take the second poll before we give them the chance to ask us a question. So let's see the second poll. How do you envision digitalization in coffee in the next 3 to 5 years? Wow. So here we are projecting ourselves into the future. While we wait for our participants to take the questions, Jean, where do you think digitalization in coffee will be in the near future?
So well, it's of course maybe a little bit easier for larger company because, well, they maybe have more means actually to more investment to do in the digitalization. But that's why also tools like ours are coming to play, because not only we can address the let's say the smaller companies, but we can also actually address the large one that have some issues with digitalization and don't have the tool, or they are a little bit behind, because we can basically replicate our environment and basically give that to a large broker, and he has a tool today that's available for him to use. He doesn't need to build it. Now, I think in the 3 to 5 years, what would be great, and that's what I've tried to mention in the second question, is if we could have some kind of standardization, you know, maybe not on all the data, but at least on how we could interface those systems, because we have to be realistic. There will not be only one system at the end. As everywhere, we will have multiple systems running. And so if we can have some kind of, again, call that an API or some kind of standard that we can use to talk together, that I think would be a great plus.
Oh. Dominik, what's your sense on this poll?
I want to be optimistic. You know, we are all shooting, we are aspiring towards an accessible solution for everybody. And there's good causes for optimism. You know, I mean, cell phone technology has exploded everywhere. You know, even in the countries that were lagging behind, you know, it's very common to see smartphones in places that you know would have thought impossible 5 years ago. And we are all conscious of the fact that we don't want to leave anybody behind. There's so many good actors. Many of them have been panelists on your webinar series here. People are really trying to involve all layers of the supply chain. And I think it's a really remarkable thing of the coffee industry that we have so much internal drive to do it. You know, we might ask, you know, do the customers really care? Or are they just trying to get a cheap cup of joe? But I want to believe that there is, you know, this sort of general trend towards equality or you know, egalitarianism, not just in coffee, but in everything. So yeah, I'm an optimist.
Great. Oscar, 5 seconds. We want to know what your sense is on this topic before we open up the Q&A.
I totally agree with Jean. I think that standardization of the coffee contract is essential. I think that right now there's a lot of different solutions in the market. I think that a lot may fail because there's not a way for all of them to interact, because everybody obviously trying to pull to their side, and I think that once we have a standard that we can use through APIs, all of these applications could interact within each other, and I think that is a more adequate way to move as an industry, and I think I wish that the SCA move a little bit forward in this regard.
Great, thank you for that. Thanks, Oscar. Let's close the poll because I think everybody's voted, and looks like the winner is an accessible solution for all actors in the chain. So it sounds like everybody's still shooting for accessibility, seems to be what the participants are longing for. All right, thanks guys. Let me close the poll. And actually we have quite a few questions. So we have about 10 minutes. I'm gonna try to have you guys answer as many as possible. And looks like the first question might be, let's have you, Oscar, take this one. It says, can you talk about the difficulty of working with the telecom companies at Origin? My failure with digitalization story came in Rwanda, because apparently, yeah, there was some failure with hosting the server was unable to connect with MTN, which I think it's a local Rwanda phone company. So yeah, can you speak towards that challenge of working with the telecom companies at Origin?
Yeah, I can relate. I can relate to that, and probably you too, Sara. Back in the day, we had a a last mile project to cover this area, to be able to collect information from the washing station all the way to till the cooperative was exporting from Tanzania in this case. And we had a lot of problems because of that. Obviously, internet access, even when we pick and choose the cooperatives to run the pilot where they had the best internet available there. And the first year worked nicely and smoothly. The second year, when we tried to implement that in more washing stations, we faced the problem that the internet quality went down on those washing stations, and the new one and no, the new ones that we wanted to add, they had a bad internet, and the old ones that had a good internet access, because of a drought in Tanzania, they didn't have reliable electricity. So that was the biggest challenge. But I think that since then, the technology has changed a lot, and there's obviously not only the internet option going through the internet. There's no other ways. There's obviously it takes a little bit more effort, but you can also do with through SMS, and there's already APIs that allow you to collect that information and turn it into put it in a system. So I think that there are other ways that you can tackle that. But yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge in remote places, especially.
Yeah, thank you, Oscar. Dominik, I want to pass this question to you because I think you might be the best one positioned here as a representative of Cropster. The question is, are most of the customers needing to know where the coffee is coming from, or is it still a niche? The reason why I'm asking you is because obviously Cropster works with a lot of roasters, so maybe you're able to share some of the insights since you know customers pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, traceability is always core to at least the specialty coffee industry, and that is something that is proudly displayed on a lot of packages, and so I assume that their marketing departments have realized that it's also good. But I think the greater interest really is roasters really wanting to ensure that when they look back at the producers that they have a relationship with, that the money really is ending up in the producer's pocket, and so systems that guarantee that or can be depended on will remain core to most systems.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. Thanks for that, and for reminding us what the roasters are looking for and expecting as we build tools at Origin.
Yeah, sorry, not just actually for roasters, even actually for large quantity. There was a story a few years ago between the Arabica and the Robusta. The price is not the same even in large quantities. So if you don't have the trace, well, some people were mixing some Robusta with Arabica and getting a better price for it. So again, there is a lot of aspects with the traceability that are very important for everybody, small or big.
That's a good point. Thanks for adding that. And while I have you here, Jean, since you do have a finance background, I think I'll let you take this one. Can anyone share more on financing and share investment for these kinds of digital solutions? How do you distribute the cost across the supply chain where the burden for data collection is predominantly at the producer group level? I think this is a reoccurring questions on people supplying the data, and the burden of data collection is on the producers, let's say. But what's your take on this one, Jean?
I hope I understood the question, but the way I see it is that when you have some data, you own the data until you own the coffee, and those data need to be they need to give you a value added. So for example, for pricing, because we're talking, if I understood, we're talking about basically sharing the cost and everything. If you look at the business, any business outside of coffee, they will not tell you actually what's their margin. It's basically the business owner that will decide, I want a margin of 10, 20, 30, 40%, whatever it is. And of course, he's trying to get the best price, but he's basing that on his cost. And when we say his cost, like the farm gate price, for example, that's one, but it's the same at each step. Huh? It will be the same for the broker or the buyer and so on. You own the coffee, you need to know this number for yourself when you negotiate. And it's true that when you're on the C market, it's a little bit different because it's an exchange. So you're not negotiating with it. It's basically an exchange, and there is speculation on it. And as soon as you put speculation, that's where you're losing a lot of things overall. But if you remove the speculation part for the farmer, if you know your cost, you need to know that you need to have at least whatever it is, let's say 20% of profit. And that's how you deal with it. And when you negotiate, you use the data basically to negotiate that. And same for the next step. When you sold your coffee to the buyer, he will know that, okay, he bought it at this price, he has all the trays, and then he can start negotiating with the next step and so on. So again, data becomes the most important at the end, because if you don't have them, you don't know those things. But we have also to be honest, if I'm let's say the third step within the supply chain, I know we all want to be transparent and to give as much to everybody within the supply chain, but most of the time, this third layer will not care actually how much the first layer got. He just knows that he bought his coffee at that price and he wants a profit of, again, 20% or more on top of that. He doesn't really mind actually how much the others got there. And that's the case even for the roaster. And again, I'm saying that because that's the reality of things. If you're a roaster, yeah, it's always nice to say that we want to share, the cost through the whole supply chain. But at the end, we have realistic data, and I think the virus has even reinforced that, because a lot of roasters have closed their door or were not able to survive. At the end, you need to look at your profit. And so, if you cannot anymore buy a coffee that's very expensive, you'll start to turn to coffee that maybe are as good but with a lower cost. Those are few examples that basically, again, are based on data.
Thanks, Gene. And it sounds like, oh, Oscar, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to add also that, yeah, I see that a lot of the producers also, for example, put a lot of the information in systems. I think that the best way to pay it back is to process that information, analyze that information, and send that in a way that they can take better decisions and be more efficient. And I think that would be the way that they could get better or get more out of the information that they provide, to have better tools to make better decisions and be more efficient.
Yeah, fully agree.
Oscar. Thanks, Oscar. We have 3 minutes, so I want to try to see if we can answer one last question that I'll read out. And Dominik, maybe you can jump in on this one. How do you ensure interoperability with other systems your users operate? For example, connect farm economic information with soil information, with soil or weather data. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I think what Tim is asking might be about APIs and our use of them. So we do have a REST API that any user can fetch their data and import it into any other system. So that's very common for accounting systems. QuickBooks, people will build a connection to Cropster and keep their inventory in Cropster, but do their accounting in QuickBooks. As far as us grabbing data from external sources, we do it in some places. We do grab the C market price on a daily basis for our dynamic pricing system, which is in our Cropster Hub product. And weather data, it's funny you mentioned that because it's a sore subject. There's a company called Dark Sky that was just purchased by Apple, and Apple's announced that they're going to shut down the API for Dark Sky, which is a big loss because it's a really good service, and we were hoping to build a connection to it. So we're looking for at other options for that, but at some point in the future, it will definitely be possible.
All right. Great. Guys, I'm so impressed. We had so much ground to cover and we did it on time and we took a lot of questions from the audience. What a great session. I think we learned a lot. There's a lot of comments in the chats agreeing with you, cheering you on, and thank you for the support and the knowledge that you've shared with us. We know that participating in these panels is not just showing up the day off, but it takes a lot of time and effort. So we definitely appreciate Dominik, Oscar, and Jean for taking the time to participate. And in general, since this is our last webinar of the series, again, I want to thank our media partners, Barista Magazine and the Coffee Podcast, and our sponsors, Cropster, ECropOrigin, and Sustainable Harvest for really keeping us, allowing us to do this series and somehow talk about digitalization at a time when we're all at home, working from home, figuring out how we can keep things afloat. So thank you everybody for your time and support throughout this period. Keep staying connected, keep drinking coffee, and watch out for some new communications and emails to get more information on the webinar series. But this is it. So big hug, everybody, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
Sarah.